My name is John, and Geraldine Brown has been my friend for nearly 40 years. I've always known her to be generous, genuine, and kinder than necessary. She has devoted her life to her students, to the care and teaching of those that need extra specialized help. Early in her career, a knowledgeable colleague told her that she would be a great candidate to teach in a foreign country, like Africa. She'd always had a desire to visit different countries, to immerse in other cultures, and like most dreams, it got postponed by work and relationships and other commitments in life. Then one day, in a print shop, she met the Reverend Billy Gibbons from the band ZZ Top. He told her that she should go to Africa. It was as though the universe was whispering to her that the dream must become a reality. It's often difficult to hear that whisper in the urgency that is one's daily life, yet the dream persisted until one day Geraldine found herself on a flight to Africa. To a town just north of the equator, to a humble sewing studio, a dilapidated but clean church and literacy center, and a new circle of family. To an adventure that would change her life. The world is a big place, and we are all very small parts of it, until we realize it really isn't all that big, and we are not so small, and that our contributions can start a ripple of change. And how do we make this world smaller? By realizing that it's actually made up of small communities. And when one community learns to grow and change for the better, then that community can bring along another, and so on and so on. The universe is perfect, whole and complete, if we can just learn to listen to it. This is one person's story about that sort of change. In small communities in the towns of Kumasi and Kasoa in the Republic of Ghana, and in Nairobi, Kenya. This is my dear friend, Geraldine Brown.
When I was a little girl, reading was very difficult for me. It took me several years to learn how the letters came together into words, and how those words became sentences, and how those sentences became paragraphs, and how when you put it all together, it becomes an idea. Yeah. Once I learned to read, I took off like a rocket. And that's what I'm seeing you do here today. I now am a teacher back in America, and in August, I begin my 33rd year of teaching. Wow. I have been very fortunate and blessed. I have received many awards, and I have been able to go to university many, many times to increase my education. The reason is because I can read. Reading is the basic of everything you can do to open up your world to be bigger and better and amazing life. I teach children who are disabled. So when you were giving us the lesson about dyslexia, I have taught many children who are dyslexic. I've also taught many children who are very angry and who have mental illnesses. I have been, had chairs thrown at me and knives pulled on me. I have had children swear and cuss at me and say bad words. I have had them hit me. I have been sent to the hospital 7 times in my career. And every day, I can't wait to get back into the classroom to teach them how to read and how to behave. Those same children who would beat me up and hit me and throw chairs at me and say bad words will also, at the end of the school year, come up to me and say, "Miss Brown, I love you." There is no greater job to do other than being a mother and a father and then a teacher. They are the most important jobs you can hold. So I am so incredibly proud of your teachers who have been so good at teaching you. And when I watch you up here and you are so proud of yourselves because you are learning to read, and it will change your life, and it will bring in new ideas, and it will have you thinking in a different way. And it is so exciting to me. And I am so proud of you. So let me clap for you. And let me give you so much gratitude in my heart. It makes me cry when I see how hard you are working to be able to learn to read, because it will better your life and it will better your family's life. So I bow to you. You are definitely the champions. Woo! Thank you.
The first thing I want to share with you is something that my friend John just mentioned in my introduction, something that I have learned is an essential human truth. The universe is perfect, whole, and complete, if we can just learn to listen to it. Though I have spent my life teaching, that video we just watched was my first experience teaching in a foreign country. I was unprepared, nervous, and overwhelmed, which put me in the perfect frame of mind to listen to the universe. And the universe spoke to me that day. I found the words, and the words led me to the next steps in this experience. But this experience began many years earlier, when a colleague told me that I should consider teaching in a foreign country, someplace like Africa. Africa! Isn't that the place where one would go to make a difference? Still, her suggestion stayed with me, coupled with other life experiences, other travel, and a feeling that I needed to do more. This notion of reaching out to do something, I began to really dream. I dreamed about going to Africa. I dreamed about it for more than 25 years. And then one day I realized I was growing tired of dreaming. On January 1st of 2019, I told my husband, David, that I was growing tired of that dream, that I really wanted to make it a reality within the next 2 years, that someday is not one of the 7 days of the week. There were, however, a few holes in my dream. You see, my only connection to Africa is a woman I met 4.5 years earlier at a home party for my beauty and makeup business. But then the universe again intervened, and that very next day, January 2nd, I received a call from this woman. Her name is Becky Rogers. She asked me the very next day if I was serious about going to Africa. She asked me what I was passionate about, and I answered literacy and sewing. She told me she had the perfect projects for me. The universe is perfect, whole, and complete if we can just learn to listen to it. After visiting Africa for several years, Becky Rogers followed her dream and she moved her family there in the summer of 2017. She and her husband Tom started a foundation called Families Mentoring Families, also known as FMF. You can find the URL for their website in the description below. This foundation focuses on 5 fundamental elements of education: family, literacy, academics, vocation, and leadership, all in the heart of Western Africa. My greater part in all of this was to assist Becky in establishing literacy centers and providing resources where volunteers donate time and money to help illiterate mothers learn how to read and learn how to write. Once they have those skills, these moms can then apply for a business loan with FMF to start a business. They pay back the loan by repaying a portion of the money, and more importantly, by volunteering hours at the literacy centers, helping others learn how to read. This mission speaks to my soul and life's career as an educator. 5 months after declaring I was going to Africa, Ronnie Bear and I were on our way. If you follow me on social media, you know that Ronnie Bear is the official ambassador for being kinder than necessary. I kept telling everybody that my trip was #gonna be amazing. Before I even left the airport back home in Las Vegas, the stage was set for my great adventure. I was informed that the airline had oversold the first leg of my trip to Chicago by one person, and I did not have an assigned seat. Hello, universe? A complete stranger gave up his seat so that I could make my connecting flight. As the door to the jetway was closing, I yelled back to the attendant, "Wait!" I realized I hadn't thanked this man, and I ran back to do so. I needed to thank him for being kinder than necessary. He asked why I needed to get to Chicago. I told him I was on my way to Africa for a 4-week humanitarian trip, and this was the flight I needed to be on to make all my other connecting flights. He hugged me and told me I was the perfect person for whom to give up his seat. I knew right then my trip was truly #gonna be amazing. And the universe was open to me. The universe is perfect, whole, and complete if we can just learn to listen to it. As I said earlier, I went to Africa to help Families Mentoring Families with their literacy centers. I was also going to help a woman named Helena in her sewing shop. I'll talk about her later. There were 2 centers with which I was specifically going to be involved. One was at the Budaburam refugee camp near Kasoa, Ghana, and the other was in Nairobi, Kenya. In the refugee camp, a group of women wanted to learn how to sew so they could start a business and generate income. FMF set up a literacy center in this camp along with a sewing school so that these women could learn to both sew and read. You see, learning to read and then helping others to learn is a requirement for getting this loan, the loan that helps to pay for the instruction at the sewing school. In the first month of the literacy center at the refugee camp, there were no students. 1 month later, there were 26 students. And 5 months later, when I was there, we had over 50 women and one man learning how to read while they waited for a building to be refurbished at the sewing school. This is Rebecca. 5 months prior to this video, Rebecca could not recognize her own written name.
When I came here, I didn't know how to read and write, but now I can read and I will read. Sarah liked to learn about the sea creatures that live far out in the ocean. She knows that there are many other things to learn. She will keep reading about sea creatures. One day she will have a aquarium. Maybe one day she will have a career aquarium.
This is what the sewing school looked like when I was there and what it looked like 1 month later. Because of donations from people like you, people being kinder than necessary to our GoFundMe campaign, we have raised over $1,500 to supply books to the Literacy Center and equipment to the sewing school. These funds continue to receive donations, which you can find out about in the description. The students here are so proud of their achievements that they actually wrote a song for Becky Rogers in her honor. They call her the champion of families mentoring families. Because she is deeply humble, she asked them to change the words from "you are the champion" to "we are the champions." My trip was well planned, with 2 weeks in Ghana and 2 weeks in Kenya. However, Becky kept telling me she wasn't sure how she was going to be able to make the trip with me to Kenya. We both set out powerful intentions and prayers to make this happen. Hello, universe! Then, about 1 month before my arrival in Africa, Becky contacted me and said her friend Patty had asked if Becky could go to Kenya to speak at a conference and to set up a new literacy center. Becky asked her for the dates. Can you guess what those dates were? Yep, the exact dates that we were going to be available in Kenya. Those were the exact dates the conference needed Becky. A week later, Becky called me again, saying that the organization putting on the conference was looking for someone who knew how to help people with disabilities. Can you guess who that was? Yep, me. Hashtag, can you believe it's happening? The universe is perfect, whole, and complete if we can just learn to listen to it. While I was there, I was asked specifically to work with Frank. He is an adorable man who has intellectual disabilities and Down syndrome. Okay, smile big. Yeah. Hey, this is Frank. Yeah, this is Frank and Frank and and I are counting to 3.
B.
Yes. 1.
One.
1. Put it down. Put the marble down. 1. Say 1.
2. 1.
1. What number is that one? 3. You did that all by yourself, man. Good job. While in Kenya, I was able to meet with some of Nairobi's disabled population at several schools. It was remarkable and very eye-opening to discover how many services they did not have. They were all so sweet, and the principals of those schools were being kinder than necessary to let us come and interrupt their academic day. It was a very busy day, and by 12 noon, Becky and I saw children at 3 schools. By then, it was time to go back to the church because we were scheduled to go on a tour of a glass shop. Our driver, George, begged us to go to just one more school. After all, it was on the way back to the church. Well, hello, universe. Wow. When we got there, the principal told us that she was so glad we came because they had been waiting for us for over 4 hours. This confused us because at the other schools we had visited that day, we were actually interrupting their classes to speak with students. However, when we walked into this classroom, we understood what the principal was talking about. There were over 30 disabled adults waiting to see me. There were adults who were blind, crippled, albino, intellectually disabled, everything in between. And to think, I nearly passed them up to tour a glass factory. As I thanked them for coming and waiting for me, I wondered how on earth I was going to help them. And then 4 people in the back started to indicate that they could not hear. I am also hearing impaired. However, my sign language skills leave a lot to be desired, and I was in a country where they speak Swahili. But as I walked toward them, I suddenly knew it was going to be okay. I signed, "Do you know American Sign Language?" And they excitedly signed back to me, "Yes." The universe once again intervened. That group of adults was definitely kinder than necessary to me. They waited for 4.5 hours to see me. We exchanged information and we talked about literacy. They told me about how no one will hire them because they are disabled. I invited them to attend the church the next day where I was scheduled to speak to the community about people with disabilities. It felt good to be able to communicate with these wonderful people, and I felt that I had brought them some comfort and hope. And we might still be able to make that tour. But then again, George looked at me and he said, "Please, just 2 more minutes of your time at the last school." Well, after what just happened, I knew I had to go to this school as well. The universe demanded it. We walked in and the principal said to me, "I am so glad you're here. They have been waiting for over 4 hours." Sound familiar? We walked into this room, and there sat 5 mothers and their children who had cerebral palsy. None of the children could walk, sit up, or talk. The mothers had carried them on their backs, ages 4 to 10, and then held them for 4 hours while they waited for me. I knew I would be longer than 2 minutes. I conducted very brief and informal assessments, talked to each of the mothers and children individually. I then realized that these mothers didn't even know each other and were dealing with their disabled children all by themselves, often never leaving the house and feeling shamed. 45 minutes later, we had set up a support group at the school for these 5 mothers. They were all so grateful for the acknowledgement that being a parent of a disabled child is often a lonely and difficult job. They were kinder than necessary to me by waiting. I appreciate their graciousness. It was one of the most amazing days of my experience in Africa. And we still managed to see the glass shop. The next day, I gave a speech at the conference about being kinder than necessary to yourself, because that is how we show others that we respect ourselves and how we command respect from others. I spoke about earning respect out of love instead of fear. I spoke to them about being kinder than necessary to their spouses and their children and to the people in the community with disabilities. There were approximately 75 people sitting in that room, and over half of them either had a disability or was the parent of a child with a disability. After an hour, I thought I was finished, and they asked me if I would continue to speak. After another 30 minutes, we were establishing support groups for their communities too. It was an amazing opportunity to use my years of experience to help them create these support groups and to help them establish guidelines for being kinder than necessary to themselves and to each other and to those less fortunate in their community. It's humbling and gratifying to me to know that these people with disabilities now have a supportive network. The universe is perfect, whole, and complete. And now it's time to meet Miss Helena. Becky Rogers introduced Helena to me back in February via Facebook Messenger. Helena and I had spoken several times on the phone, and we were excited to finally meet one another in person.
I'm just about to go and meet Helena, the lady with the sewing shop, and I'm super excited. We're at her home.
Hello, my sister.
Hello, my sister. How are you?
I'm fine.
Good. It's so good to meet you. Oh,
Glad to meet you.
I'm so glad to meet you too. I'm really glad.
You're welcome.
Thank you for letting me come into your beautiful home and meet your beautiful children and your handsome husband. You're dying to welcome me.
Here was Helena's beautiful family and my very first meal of many in her home, chicken and rice, and tossed salad with pork and beans, mayonnaise, and ketchup. I was grateful she prepared this meal for me and made me feel so welcomed. Isn't that being kind? The next day, we went to her shop, and as you can see, she didn't have much. What she did have was piled high and stacked on the floor or covering her sewing tables. What she didn't have was space for storage. These piles of fabric were the many jobs that she has to sew for customers, and she didn't have any kind of order to them, and she had no idea how many jobs she actually had.
We are finally here, and we are going to have them open up the things that all of you have donated. So there's been money donated and there have been actual items donated. So I want to just kind of show everybody your studio. We came here last night after a lovely dinner and entertainment with her. Becky and her kids are all like, oh, get us out of here. We're not part of the movie. Anyway, it's a lovely studio.
Look at her face.
Where shall we start? We'll start from here.
I brought her 2 boxes and a suitcase of supplies with the money I received from our GoFundMe sewing campaign. My goal was to raise $1,000 to help Helena, and I am proud to say that with the generous donations of many people, we exceeded that goal. This fund continues to receive donations for her shop as well as several other sewing shops. She was amazed at all the donations that people had sent to her. She was so excited about the tools and equipment that she recognized, like threads, elastic, pins, and scissors. But there were a lot of things she did not recognize, and she had no idea how to use them. So we spent an afternoon learning exactly what the various tools were for. Several times she was simply overwhelmed by the kindness of strangers and all the things that people had donated to her shop. She was thrilled to receive her high-end professional gingers. Anyone in the sewing business knows the importance of good scissors. What do you think?
I don't know what to say again. I'm very, very, very excited. Thank you very much.
You're
God
welcome.
really bless you.
You're welcome. Thank you for letting me do this for you. A sister. A sister. Her smile says it all. I worked with Helena and her students how to organize all her different sewing jobs by teaching them to fold the fabric so she could place the jobs like books on a shelf, and so she could easily see what to work on next. Of course, Ronnie Bear had to get in on some of the action as well. Several of the children in the neighborhood helped us out too. We called a local contractor to build the shelves, and Ronnie Bear showed him how it's done. While they made shelves, I showed Helena some shortcuts that I have learned. But to be honest, I think I learned more from her than she did from me. Helena takes 6 or 7 measurements, makes a couple of chalk marks on the fabric, and starts to cut. She doesn't use a pattern. That was amazing to me. Then she decided to teach me to do the same. Helena is busy teaching me how to sew without a pattern. And I know how to sew without a pattern. She's teaching me how to cut and dress make without a pattern. She's very It turned out that the dashiki I was making was mine. Helena's neighbors and volunteers from Families Mentoring Families helped us to make 2 pegboards, a completely new and different concept for them, but one that they loved. The shelves went up, and we headed to Central Market to a paint store. Now, that was an interesting experience and somewhat intimidating too. There are 2 million people who live in the city of Kumasi, and I think all but 10 of them were in the market that day. Once the shelves went up and were painted, the measurements for an awning were taken. We continued to organize, sort, and figure out how to put her sewing studio together. She was so excited as each day she saw things move off the floor and sewing tables and onto the shelves and pegboards. We went shopping for a brand new mirror, and we got new drapes for her fitting room. Can you believe the difference? This is the beautiful Miss Helena putting the finishing touches on beautiful dress. So it's what we know in America as serging around a raw edge seam. Here in Africa they call it knitting, and it's appropriately named because basically that's what these threads do, is that they knit. Ronnie Bear loved helping Helena whenever he could. In the 2 weeks I was in Ghana, the electricity went out at least 7 times. One night, after working hard all day, poof, there it went. Helena was near the end of a project and wanted to finish. Everybody used the flashlights from their phones so that she could continue to work in the dark. She is truly a consummate professional who loves her craft. Even though she had a lot of projects to complete, she insisted on making me 2 dresses as a way to say thank you for all I had done. 7 measurements, no pattern, and 1.5 days, and I had 2 lined dresses that fit me perfectly, plus a shirt for my husband. Talk about being kinder than necessary. Seriously, aren't they beautiful? On Helena's wish list, there was this item she called a canopy, which here in America we know as an awning. I remember thinking, oh my goodness, I have no idea how I'm going to make that happen, but we are going to make that happen. Her shop faces south, so usually the sun is right here all day long. And here's the step to get in, literally one step away. And because we're at the equator, it doesn't actually change. But see where the sun is clear out there? That is where the sun has been all day long. This canopy is making a humongous difference. The studio is so much cooler. It's not nearly as humid. It's just amazing. Well done, everybody. I documented my trip on social media, and many people were waiting to see the final results of Helena's studio. This is so exciting that I tear up at times. This was what we accomplished in Kumasi with the people helping us back here in the United States. I am really proud of everybody. Everybody, and I mean everybody, enjoyed the canopy. Hang on to your hats. Introducing Miss Helena's Sewing Studio. From the road, clients and neighbors can see her awning, and it welcomes them to come and sit in the shade. As we walk in, you can look around and see it is much more organized. The tables and floors are cleared off. Before I arrived, Families Mentoring Families and donations from other people helped Helena get her serger and her Phoenix embroidery machine. Hey, look! There are my 2 dresses that she made me in a day and a half with no pattern. Absolutely amazing. She loves her pegboards, and she now has room to grow and expand. In her life story, she wrote that she wanted a shop where she could hang dresses. She dreamed of having a nice fitting room where a curtain came down and her clients were able to have privacy. And of course, what is a fitting room without a good full-length mirror? Just look at these beautiful shelves. All the fabric lined up like books are the jobs that she already had scheduled. There were 120 jobs waiting for her to complete. She now knows that she needs to start on the left and work her way across until she finishes, and that she can just keep adding new jobs. Helena told me that she would be able to have those 120 jobs completed in only 3 months. Oh my goodness, I can't even imagine doing that. She has 140 linear feet of shelving, which will allow her to be able to grow into an even bigger business. Her dream is to be able to have employees and teach them her craft. Helena can now achieve her dreams because people here in the United States have been kinder than necessary with their financial and tangible donations. She has taken a couple of young women on now under her wing, where they are going to help her fulfill a contract for 1,000 school uniforms. I love the symmetry of that. Helena making school uniforms. This is just another way that she is helping to teach her community. The magic within the universe manifested itself every single day of this trip. I know in my heart that I will be returning to Africa to continue working with Families Mentoring Families. I know that I will continue to help establish other sewing shops, literacy centers, and to work with people who have disabilities. I am absolutely blown away by the humility and the love of these 2 and their family. And there's a saying in America that says it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to get a lot of things accomplished. And this time we saw a village here in Kumasi
So many of your friends came together to help, and this is a social place. The sewing studio of Helena's is a social place. People love to be here. But it also took a village back in America, didn't it, to make this happen? So anyway, I want the two of you to know I love you very much.
We love you too.
We love you. We love you. We
Thank
love
you.
you too.
I'm very happy about this studio because my wife Helena is naturally gifted in sewing, and I know it's the gift of God who God has given her. She has been dreaming about sewing since ties in the realm of the spirit, and I always exhort her that she should have faith to come to pass. God being so good, we met Sister Becky Rogers. With the family monitoring families, we all worship at the same church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Divine Word in Kumasi, Bantamastic, and she has helped her. She introduced Sister Jerry to her, to my wife, and she came down from the States to help put up this sewing studio. Love and family relationship which she has shown to us. We do appreciate all that we are saying, that may the Lord bless you and the Glorious and your family. Thank you.
I started about 25 years ago, and I sewn in the house for 9 years. I wish I could have my own shop. By the grace of God, I met Sister Rogers Becky, who had helped me a lot and also helped me write my life story. Then she helped me with the money some people donated, which made it possible for me to buy overlocking machines, phonics machine, and different kinds of lining. Okay. And my husband too helped me rent this store. Becky Rogers always talk about Sister Jerry Brown. She told me that she will come and also help me. Sister Jerry Brown helped me by making shells, pegboard, canopy, mirror, and she also brought different kinds of threads, different kinds of scissors, many, and so many things. I appreciate that, and I thank God for her life. Indeed, she has changed this shop into a good one. I really appreciate that. Bless you. I know God will protect you and bless you. Thank you very much.
Generous donations from friends, family, and strangers who are willing to be kinder than necessary raised over $1,000 through GoFundMe literacy campaigns that we established for this purpose. Of course, you can read more about it in the description. Becky and I were able to use that money and other donations to buy supplies for the 2 existing literacy centers in Ghana and to help establish more centers in Nairobi, Kenya. This is the church in Nairobi where the conference was held. where we planned to start a new literacy center. And these are some of our new friends, the people in charge. A tent was set up outside where Becky and I taught 20 volunteers for this community's new literacy center and several moms who wanted to learn to read. I know in my heart that we can definitely bring a change of positivity to this community if we can help these parents learn to read well enough to read to their own children. Part of our training addressed the importance of this. Of all the people sitting there, only one had ever been read to, and no one sitting there had actually ever read to anybody. We also taught them the importance of playing games with the students in order to encourage their imaginations, which would in turn increase their ability to learn. They had never played Connect 4 before, and they had a blast doing it. Part of the training also included having students read out loud to me so I could assess if they had any reading skills. Here they are holding up the books that they read. The papers they're holding are their enrollment papers for mom's school at this new literacy center. While we were busy training the volunteers and students for the literacy center, inside the church, teachers from the local schools were being trained on a specific program to help their students learn. As you can see, the inside of this church left a lot to be desired. We found this little mess in the back. This is where the literacy center was going to be set up. There were huge rocks, trash, and broken chairs that needed to be removed. One evening, after a long day at the church, the people in charge drove us home. Now, let me just try to impress on you how crazy traffic is in Nairobi. Well, actually, the traffic everywhere in Africa is crazy. Never was it not. Anyway, it took them 2.5 hours to get us home that evening. Then they drove back to the church. At about 10 p.m., they began to clean up the part of the church that was supposed to be the literacy center. They worked through the night and came back to get us in the morning. When we arrived back at the church, everything had been cleaned out. All the rocks, debris, they were outside. And we were able to get the contractor started on building shelves for the new literacy center. You can see the pride that they took in helping to get this center started. What motivated me from the beginning of this dream was a somewhat selfish idea that I could help change somebody's life in Africa. But here's the truth of it. They have affected my life in so many ways. But there are 3 people who deeply affected me. Rebecca from the Liberian refugee camp, Helena and her sewing studio, and Marietta. Marietta is a 30-year-old mother who came to sign up for mom's school so she could learn to read. Here we are filling out her application, and she is so excited. Not only does she not know how to read, but she has no idea what her name looks like or how it is spelled. As I filled out the application for her, 2 friends helped me to spell her first and last name. And then I wrote her name on a piece of paper in big letters so that she could take it home and look at it every day, so that one day she would recognize her name and she would know how to read it and spell it. Later that day, Becky and I were training on the first lesson. This lesson was on the letter and sound of M. As the lesson progressed, we asked for the volunteers and students to tell us words that begin with M. And I said to Marietta, Marietta, can you tell us a word that begins with M? And she was able to come up with a couple of words, and we all clapped for her. Then I asked her again, Marietta, can you think of another word that begins with M? she could not. And then one of her friends sitting next to her turned to her and she said, your name begins with M. Woo-hoo-hoo! Hello, universe. This was a magical moment. The look on her face as she began to realize what her friend had said was priceless. She looked at her friend and she looked back at me and she said, my name? My name. My name begins with M. Yes, yes, Maria Ta, your name begins with M. Later that day, as we were getting ready to travel back to our apartment, she came running up to me with her son, Emmanuel, and her husband, Pete. And she said, Teacher, teacher, I want to introduce my husband. I told him how proud I was that she was coming here to learn to read. She then held my hands, looked at her husband, and said, this is my teacher. My name begins with M. This small step for Maria Ta was a giant leap of my faith for this whole enterprise. Families mentoring families, the literacy centers, Becky's tireless devotion, the advocacy for people with different abilities, the whole idea of using kindness as a gateway for seeing and living in the world was wrapped up in Maria Ta's discovery of the simple fact that her name begins with M, and now she knows it. The universe is perfect, whole, and complete. We just need to listen to it. Maria Ta may not be able to read yet, but she sure knows how to lead an audience in song. The next morning as we entered the church, this was happening. She is the woman in purple, singing loud and proud. I appreciate you sharing with me a part of my journey to Africa. I hope I have inspired you to be kinder than necessary to yourself in order to pay it forward to others, whether it be with time or money to an organization that makes you happy, doing something for a neighbor, getting involved in causes in your own community, or traveling halfway around the world to bring the gifts of your energy and humanity to strangers. Strangers who I know will become part of your family. I firmly believe that this is how we make the world smaller, more loving, and full of kindness. I encourage each of you to create an inspired future where you can listen to the universe, take that to heart, and create your own magical moments. My hope for each of you is that one day you have, in your own special way, someone say, this is my teacher. My name begins with M.